Welcome everyone. Before we dive into lots of Python programming and automation, I want to make sure that you have a solid setup for your Python development. When starting out, it's probably okay to just install Python from python.org, but as you get into more advanced projects and ultimately creating projects used by many, this simple installation actually gets in the way. So, I want to show you how to set up your machine for professional Python development using Pyenv, Poetry, and VS Code. Alright, so step 1 is to install Pyenv. Now, I'll include this URL inside of the notes in the video, but this is where you want to get to, github.com/pyenv/pyenv. If we scroll down here, you can see that it has everything that you need to know about installing, setting it up, and even goes into detail about how things work under the hood. If you're on a Mac like I am, then all you need to do is brew install Pyenv. And that will install Pyenv to your machine. Then, to install any version of Python, you say pyenv install, and then the version you'd like to install. Let's say you want to do 3.8.6, or you want to do 3.7.3 or 3.9. You get the point. You can install any one of these now. Once that's installed, you can check which versions you have on your machine. So check this out. When I print out all of my versions, I have my system version, which would be the 2.7 that Mac comes with, but then I also have three others, a 3.7.3, 3.8.6, and 3.9.0. So I have three different interpreters installed here. However, you do see this little star next to my 3.8.6. That's because I set it as my global interpreter, just like this. Now, instead of my machine or global interpreter being 2.7, when I do python -- version, I now get 3.8.6, which is the one that I set globally. Some of you may be familiar with having to do something like python 3 -- version. But with Pyenv, I no longer need to do this. It's as easy as me saying Pyenv global, let me set my 3.9. And then when I do Pyenv versions again, check it out. Now 3.9 is my global version. And it's just as easy to set it back to what I had before. Look how simple this is. Aw, yeah. So, my recommendation is to go to this URL, github.com/pyenv/pyenv, and follow the instructions here. But if you're on a Mac, then it's as easy as this. Brew install Pyenv is the first thing you do, and then you can add this snippet right here to your shell configuration. In my case, I use Z shell, so I would add this snippet to my zshrc file. And just so you know, this snippet is posted during the installation process. So once you install Pyenv, they will actually show you this again. So no need to memorize this or copy it from the video. They'll actually post this snippet right after the installation. All right, next up, step number 2 is to install Poetry. Poetry is going to be the package manager that we're going to use. So you just go here to pythonpoetry.org and you'll get this really cool looking landing site. It goes over quite a bit, as well as all the installation guides and everything that you would probably look for in their documentation to do things like setup, configuration, and how they do a bunch of other stuff. But we're not really going to focus on this part. Really what we're going to do is just install it. But instead of using brew to do it, please do not use brew. If you use brew, it's going to install it to your machine again, and the problem with that is we're not taking advantage of Pyenv's ability to switch between interpreters. So instead of using brew to install Poetry, let's just use pip to install it. So we'll say pip install Poetry. Because we used Pyenv to set the global interpreter, we don't need to say pip3 install Poetry. We can just say pip install, and that's going to be installed to the globally set interpreter. That was a pretty simple one, but let's go over it anyway. So step 2 is to install Poetry using pip install Poetry. Then we'll add this line or this code snippet to your shell config, just like you did in step 1. If you're not using Unix, then make sure to check out Poetry's documentation to make sure you install it correctly for your OS. All right, with that, the very last thing we need to do is set up VS Code to use this. As you can see, I created an empty project here in my dev folder called Pyenv Poetry Example, and we're going to be building a project from scratch in here so you can see how everything gets set up. To get started, I'm going to use Poetry init. Press enter, and Poetry will start with this wizard or this guide to create everything for you. So, what's my package name? The default is in square brackets, and I'm okay with that. The version, yep, that's all right. Don't need a description right now. I am the author, no license right now. And yes, any version above 3.8 will be compatible with this project. Would you like to define your main dependencies interactively? For now, I'm going to say yes, or I just press enter as well for the default. This part of the wizard is asking what my main libraries are. In this case, because I'm going to be doing some web and API automation with Python, I'm going to use Pylance.io. It's then going to query PyPy and ask which packages match my search of Pylance.io. There's only one, so I'm going to press 0 and then enter. But you'll see that there's going to be more listed later on. For now, 0, enter. Let's add Pylance.io to our main one. Do you want to add any version constraints? So we could say I need Pylance.io to be a specific version or greater than a specific version. In this case, I'm just going to press enter, get me the latest. If I have any other packages I want to add, I can keep going. But in this case, Pylance.io is the only one I care about. So I'm just going to press enter to skip. All right, next question is, would you like to define your development dependencies interactively? And I'm also going to say yes here, so enter for the default. The first package I want is, let's do AutoPep8. AutoPep8 is a style guide and a formatter, so I'm going to install this one. There's a lot of hits this time, but the one I care about is position 0, the very first one. So 0 and enter. Any version constraints? Nope, just give me the latest, so I'll press enter again. For the next package, I'm going to use Flake8. Flake8 is essentially a linter, so let's do that one, Flake8. And I also want the first one here. So 0 for the first option, and add that. Skip the version constraint. And I don't have any more packages, so I'm going to press enter here. You can actually see what it's going to generate here. This is the file that's going to happen. I like everything I'm seeing, so I'm just going to press enter for yes. And check it out. We got a pipeproject.toml file created in our project. If we open it up, sure enough, we see everything that we specified in here. And that happened automatically. Very cool, right? Now that we've specified everything that we want in our project, we can now install all these packages and get this project going. So inside my terminal, I'll say poetry install, and it's going to look for this pipeproject.toml file to install everything from it. Step 1, you can see, is that it's creating a virtual environment for me and then resolving the dependencies. And look how fast it goes. Poetry does things asynchronously instead of doing it one by one, so it's a lot faster. And that was it. Over here on the right hand side, it took about 25 seconds. If I was doing this with pip, it'd probably take a little bit longer, but anyway, what we want to do next is tell VS Code which interpreter we're going to be using for this project. As you saw before, Poetry already created a virtual environment and is managing it for us. We can check this out with poetry env info and get the path. I want to show everything in info so you can see just how much this is keeping track of for you. But for now, what we really care about is this path. So if you ever wanted just the path, you could say env info -- path and grab this, the same one you saw above right here. All right, so let's grab this and let's copy it because we're going to need this for this next step. At the very top here, click on View and then Command Palette. There's also a keyboard shortcut for that, but open the Command Palette and then let's configure Python, or select the Python interpreter. This first one here. So click on that. I hope this goes without saying, but in order for you to do Python with VS Code, you will need to have the Python extension installed. So if you didn't see that select item in the list, that means that you don't have the Python extension. So make sure you go to the extension marketplace, find Python, and also find Pylance, and install those two. Then try finding the select interpreter. From there, none of these are the ones that we want. We actually want to do enter interpreter path. Click on that, and then paste in the path that we copied from Poetry, and press enter. Hopefully you noticed the change there. A few things happened. In the bottom left corner, the interpreter actually changed to my virtual environment. Also, I got this VS Code folder because we actually have a setting now in our project for VS Code to know, hey, use this virtual environment and this Python interpreter for this project. Sweet. So next thing I'm going to do is inside of my project, I'm going to make a tests folder, or not a test folder, just tests. There we go. And inside of here, let's make our very first test. And I'm just going to call it test_example.py. Let's make a super easy example. Let's just say like test sum. And we're just going to assert that 1 + 1 is equal to 2. But wait, I don't get anything up here saying to run or debug my test. That's because we haven't told VS Code which testing framework we're going to be using. So just like we did with the Python interpreter, we're going to configure the tests. So let's open up the command palette again. And this time, let's find, if I can spell right, configure tests. And for me, it's this first option, Python configure tests. Pylance.io comes with the PyTest framework already built in. So we're going to use PyTest. And I'm going to select the test directory that's going to hold all of my tests. Boom, lots of things happened. Lots of stuff got generated. Let's check out settings.json again. And yep, sure enough, we got a bunch of new stuff in here showing that our PyTest is enabled. I'm also going to use some exclude files here because I don't like seeing that PyTest cache and PyCache everywhere. So let's exclude some stuff. Files.exclude. And let's get rid of .pytest cache and PyCache. And now it's easy for us to click right here in our test. We have run test and debug test. Hopefully you're familiar with these already, but let me put a breakpoint here and then debug the test. You'll see it stop right here. We can play and continue or step into, or all the good stuff is all in here now. So we can debug the test, or we can also just run the test. And 1 + 1 is not equal 0. It caught me because I had a 2 before and it went back to a 0 when I was trying to delete that, but good job test. It caught my mistake. So we can now easily change this to a 2. Bada bing, bada boom. Run the test again. Let's make sure this thing passes with some check marks. Let's go. Amazing. See, not bad at all. All right, so we now have our interpreter set up for the project. We have our test framework set up for the project. Let's see what else we got to set up. Ah, yes. How about our linter? For our linter, we were using Flake 8. So let's click Flake 8 here. Let's set that up. Back to our settings.json. You can see that these got enabled as well. So yes, you can install your own linters, your own formatters. If you want to just leave it all to Pylance, which is Microsoft's language server for Python, you can also leave it there as well and just have Pylance do all the heavy duty lifting. But some people like to have or specify their own linters and formatters. But that part's up to you. At least you know how to do it now, right? The very last thing I can think of to do, without getting into more like personal preferences and configurations, is to set up Pylance. That way we can write a really simple UI test. I'm going to kill this process completely. and reopen it. Oh, and I want you to see what just happened. VS Code is now very, very aware of the virtual environment that we created with Poetry, right? So it sourced it, activated the environment, and let me clear this so it's prettier. You can actually see that we're inside of the virtual environment. Now, I'm using Powerline 10K. That's why I have these pipes and all this fancy stuff. But for you, you might see something as simple as Pyenv on the left-hand side of your shell. That also means you're inside of the activated virtual environment, and that's a good thing. So if you're already inside of the virtual environment, then all you got to say is Pylenium. So for now, let's make sure we have the right thing. Pylenium -- version. There you go. We have version 1.12.1. And to initialize Pylenium, all it is Pylenium init. However, I also want to show, let me deactivate and get out of the virtual environment. I also want to show that you can use Poetry to run these commands as well. This is really helpful when you're not inside of the virtual environment. You may be inside of a terminal, or maybe you're using Vim or something like that. You don't have to be inside of the virtual environment. You can actually run commands directly into the virtual environment. So instead of saying Pylenium version directly in the virtual environment, we can actually send commands using Poetry run. So Poetry run Pylenium version. We get the same result, but we're outside of the virtual environment. There are pros and cons to each one of these approaches, so I just wanted to make sure that you were aware that you could do either one. If you're inside of the virtual environment already, awesome, run just Pylenium init or pytest -k this thing. Just run commands like you normally would. If you're outside of the virtual environment, you can just say Poetry run followed by the command you want to send to that virtual environment. Okay, so Poetry run Pylenium init. Perfect. We get some files created for us. A pylenium.json, a conftest, and a pytest_ini. This right here, this Pylenium JSON, is just our configuration file. Right now you can see it's defaulted to Chrome. So let me write a simple test using this. Def test Google, let's say. I'm sure this is something you've all seen me do already. From pylenium.driver, import Pylenium. The one with the big P. We don't want the little p. There we go. If you're familiar with PyCharm, you usually don't have to import things like this because you would automatically get IntelliSense, because PyCharm has PyTest support. So it would know exactly what Py is. It knows it's a Pylenium object. In VS Code, it doesn't. So to give it some help, we're being very explicit here, saying the Py fixture is of type Pylenium, so then we get that IntelliSense. So now I can say things like py.visit, and you see that I get this awesome auto suggestion. Let's go to our Google website that we love so much. Let's search for, I don't know, I like doing puppies. So let's do that. Let's keep searching for our cute little puppies, or the poopies. We're going to type in puppies to the search field, and then let's get the btnk element. That way we can submit said search. .submit, there we go. And then one quick assertion. Let's make sure that the title Py should contain title of the puppies. Not too bad, right? I mean, I did this all from memory, so let's see how good I actually did. Let's click Run Test. Let's check it out. Huzzah, we searched for puppies. And there you go. So I hope with that you were able to see everything it takes in order to set up your machine for professional Python development, and also set up VS Code to use these things. So I would like to recap one last time what we went over. We checked out Pyenv to manage our interpreters and make it easy to switch between them. We installed Poetry as well, which is a package and a dependency management tool to make it really easy for us to create virtual environments, manage them automatically, create these pyproject.toml files, all that good stuff. And then the last thing we did was show you how to set up VS Code to use this interpreter, use your test framework, as well as any formatters or linters that you would like to use as well. If you found this video helpful, please leave a like or comment on anything else you would like me to cover, whether it's with Python or any other tool or language or anything like that. Please let me know in the comments below and share it with your friends. Y'all, let's do some Python development and some test automation with Python. Thanks for watching and have a good day. Bye.